Hey listeners, it's your boy Darren Patterson, one half of the illustrious SNL Nerds. Y'all know me, still the same OG, but I've been low key. And surprise, surprise, we're giving you guys a beautiful bonus episode for your ears right before Labor Day weekend. How about that? We're nice like that. So you are welcome. So this is basically what you're going to be hearing on this episode. John Trumbull and I were guests on the Fade Out podcast hosted by Rob Kelly. Basically, that's a podcast where each episode they focus on one actor who is no longer with us, who has passed on, and we focus on their final film, the film they went out on. And since we're an SNL podcast, we figure, well, let's do an SNL cast member and their final film. Let's do maybe Mr. John Belushi. And that's what we're doing here. We talk all about John Belushi and the final film he went out on, now infamous, oddball, and just straight up bizarre 1981 film Neighbors with Dan Aykroyd and Kathy Moriarty. And oh boy, it's an interesting one. It's definitely a film. It's definitely a film. So we just kind of go into the history of this film, what went into making it, all the troubles that went into it. There were like a lot of behind the scenes drama. It was very troubled production, and we also just try to make sense of this very odd film. And we'll, of course, as always, we make it funny too. It's always a laugh riot when you're with us. So, give this podcast a listen, give this episode a listen, and enjoy yourself. And if you want to listen to other episodes of the Fade Out podcast, you can listen to them on all the platforms that you listen to your podcasts there. Your Spotify's, your Google Plays, your Apple Podcasts, and the like. Fade Out is also on the Fire and Water Podcast Network. So go to fireandwaterpodcast.com. Give them a listen. Yeah, give this episode a listen. Thanks again for always supporting us and listening to us and believing in us. And as always, until then, nerds out.
Hello and welcome to Fade Out, the podcast that examines the final films of Hollywood's brightest lights. Proud member of the Fire and Water Podcast Network. I'm your host, Rob Kelly. For this episode, our subject is comedy icon John Belushi. Born in Chicago in 1949 to a large Albanian family, including younger brother Jim, John Belushi always had a yearning to perform. After trying his hand at music in high school, Belushi formed his own comedy troupe after college, where he caught the attention of Bernie Sahlins, the founder of Second City. He joined the cast alongside other future stars Harold Ramis, Joe Flaherty, and Brian Doyle Murray. It didn't take long for everyone to see that Belushi was a magnetic performer, able to capture the audience's attention with just a grunt or a nod. He soon joined the National Lampoon's production of Lemmings, a parody of the Woodstock generation. While part of the Lampoon, he worked with even more future stars like Chevy Chase, Christopher Guest, Gilda Radner, Bill Murray, and the man who would become his closest friend, Dan Aykroyd. Despite his reputation for being difficult on stage and off, his skills were undeniable, and he was hired by a somewhat leery Lorne Michaels for his new show, Saturday Night Live. After Chevy Chase left SNL in the beginning of the second season, Belushi grabbed the spotlight and never gave it back, becoming the show's signature star for the next 3 seasons. His fame reached stratospheric levels when, in 1978, thanks to his appearance in his first film, National Lampoon's Animal House, and his partnership with Aykroyd as one half of the Blues Brothers, Belushi hit the show business triple play, a #1 record, the #1 film of the year, and the hottest show on television. Despite his now iconic performance as Bluto, Belushi was determined to show audiences what else he could do. He co-starred with Jack Nicholson in 1978's Goin' South, then took a mostly dramatic turn in 1978's Old Boyfriends. He went back to gonzo comedy in 1979's 1941, a notorious flop. He left SNL after the 4th season with Aykroyd, and the two of them would star in the now classic The Blues Brothers in 1980. He tried his hand as romantic comedy in 1981's Continental Divide, and then re-teamed with Aykroyd for what would be his final film, Neighbors. Here with me to discuss Neighbors and the all-too-short film career of John Belushi are the hosts of the SNL Nerds podcast, Darren Patterson and John Trumbull. Hi, guys.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for having us.
Hey, Rob. How's it going? Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of the SNL Nerds podcast. It's quite an impressive achievement in SNL fandom, and that's saying something. So I'm really thrilled to finally be doing this episode on John Belushi and be talking with you guys about his career. Now, as mentioned, his final film is Neighbors. It was released on December 18th, 1981. But we'll wind back the clock a little bit further. I want to find out from both of you, where does your fandom, if you can call it that, with John Belushi start? Did you first discover him as a member of SNL, or was he already, he was a movie star by the time you guys got around to discovering him? So Darren, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, I discovered Belushi. It was definitely during his years on SNL. Like in the 90s, I still am a huge, comedy nerd, and I really loved watching a lot of the, sketch comedy shows in particular. And they always used to have those quite a bit on like VH1 and Comedy Central. They would show like reruns of the old SNL all over and over again, Old Kids in a Hall, and I just kind of watch all that up. And yeah, I think that's where I knew about Belushi. I think it was, what was that maybe caught my eye about him? Probably maybe one of his samurai sketches, like Samurai, Laundromat, or Samurai Tax Attorney or something like that. that I was like, oh wow, this is pretty interesting. And I remember that was my earliest memory of him. And of course, like when he would do one of his rants behind the news desk,
sure.
he did that, but no,
right.
And then he just like flop, do a back flop over the desk, and it just looked like the most manic, dangerous thing I'd ever seen in my life.
Let's talk about the bad luck of the Irish.
Yeah, exactly. Now, as far as my fandom of Belushi, I like Belushi. Me personally, I think I like some other cast members a little bit more. Aykroyd was a little bit more versatile, I think, and Bill Murray, of course, is Bill Murray. But I appreciated Belushi. I appreciated what he brought, and the performer he was.
I can't remember for sure if I first saw Belushi on SNL or if maybe I saw Animal House first. Maybe SNL, that probably would have been a little more accessible to me, with SNL reruns being on basic cable and like the best of compilations. But yeah, like Darren said, Belushi was just a pretty remarkable talent, and he was great on the show. The little chocolate donuts commercial spot, that's a favorite of mine still.
The donuts of champions.
Yeah. And he's like literally smoking a cigarette while he's doing it.
They've got the sugar I need to get me going in the morning.
Exactly. And the Blues Brothers number that he did with Aykroyd when they did Soul Man, that's still one of my favorite things that's ever been on Saturday Night Live. I think that's just incredible.
Can I tell you that's my favorite cold open the show has ever done? Is that song?
That's a great choice, man.
The energy of it is so high that
Yeah.
I'm just like, I can't imagine what that was like to be in the studio to be that. The crowd is so crazy, and it's not funny. It's just a song.
Yeah.
It's kind of atypical, but every time it always cheers me up. That performance is just so high energy and it's so fun.
Yeah, it's great stuff. So, and I'm of course a huge fan of Animal House, and Blues Brothers is another comedy classic. So yeah, I quite like the John Belushi.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of amazing. You guys are experts on the show, and I'm sure that you have read a number of the myriad books that have been written about SNL. The joke is I think it's like they say like the Bible and Abraham Lincoln are like the only two subjects that have been written about more than the early years of Saturday Night Live at this point. But it's interesting is of course in the early years, I mentioned it in the intro, was that, Chevy Chase was by accident the star of the show in the first season, because he was such a powerful performer. He was also kind of co-writing the show a lot with Lorne and Michael O'Donoghue, and he got to be on screen under his own name with no makeup, unlike the rest of the cast. And so he had a tremendous head start, and that turned the show a little bit into like the Chevy Chase show. And of course, the rest of the crew was not super happy about that. But it's sort of funny that the minute Chase is gone, he leaves like 3 or 4 shows into the second season. Belushi's like, well, now I'm the star. And you're like, no, wait a minute. There's no star. It's an ensemble. But it was, in John's mind, it was like, no. I've been playing second fiddle to this guy for a year, and now I'm going to take over. And he kind of did. Because he and Gilda Radner was, in fact, one of the writers called them this in one of the SNL books I read, the meat and potatoes, they said, of the show. was like that. They got the preponderance because he was such a dynamic performer. And you're talking about a guy who was standing on stage with, as you guys just talked about, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, and yet he is still kind of ostensibly sort of the star. So you can see it makes total sense that he wanted to replicate his success in other arenas. And as I mentioned in the intro, him and Aykroyd formed the Blues Brothers and it becomes this whole thing outside of SNL. And then he goes and he does his first movie, which is Animal House. Now, I know technically he did a voice in an animated film called The Shame of the Jungle.
Yeah, Tarzoon. It's a Tarzan parody, I guess.
Wow.
I saw it decades ago on VHS. From what I remember, it's terrible. Like, it's not funny at all. It's basically Tarzan, but if it was dirty. That's how I remember, like dirty jokes involving Tarzan. And that's not going to be anything we're going to bother with discussing in this episode. Can you guys remember when you first saw Animal House? Were you of age or were you a little technically too young to have seen it?
I was definitely of age. I think I saw it when probably I was like in college or something. And it's one of those things where I think like around college time, I sort of fancied myself like a bit of a cinema fan, or like I think I went through this phase where I really wanted to watch all of the comedies and all the dramas and all the films that people considered classics. Like I wanted to educate myself. So like that's when I probably saw Animal House and, Caddyshack and stuff, like films like that, like films that people say like, oh no, you have to watch this film. And I saw it back then and I was like, oh, this is definitely something I haven't. I mean, it's like it was something I'd sort of seen before because around that time, American Pie had come out, and it's like films that sort of borrowed heavily from the Animal House sort of blueprint. But when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is where all these movies that are coming out now. This is where they got their ideas from. They're all kind of riffing and borrowing from this one film. It's definitely eye-opening, I would say at the time.
John?
I must have seen Animal House sometime in my teens, so I wasn't quite of age, but I think that's half the fun of Animal House is if you see it when you're like a little too young for it still. But I mean, it just, and I loved it from the start. I mean, it's still a hilarious film. It's deeply wrong. I mean, in the stuff that they do, but it's still funny as hell. I gotta admit that. I mean, it's not PC by any stretch of the imagination. But
no, it is.
Damn, is it still funny?
Yeah, I watch it pretty regular. It's a good, it's a movie we put on to go to sleep to because I've seen it so many times, so I don't care if I fall asleep on it. And that's not an insult. Obviously, it's sort of like comfort food. It's that despite it being so sloppy with its humor, kind of like it's all over the place. It seems kind of, it has some sort of seriousness to it. Like the Boone and Katie story is kind of serious, but then the movie also has, Tom Hulse in a devil outfit sitting on his shoulder. I mean, it's like it really encompasses all kinds of styles, but it's a deceptively good movie. Like it looks like it was from the outside. You're like, oh, it's Animal House. It's just kind of gross out comedy, but the performances are really sharp. They use, and this kind of gets in perfectly with our talk about John Belushi. It uses him perfectly.
Yes.
I mean, there's this famous story about that he originally wanted to be in on the road trip sequence. Mm-hmm. And John Landis was like, no, you can't be in the road trip. You're Bluto. We can't have you in a car. You got to, you're like this force of nature. And it's like, Landis knew exactly what Belushi's appeal was in that movie and how exactly to use it. And you watch it and you go, there's long chunks where he's not in the movie. And he's not really the star of it. He doesn't have any arc, I mean, Boone has an arc somewhat. And some of the other Thomas Hulse characters kind of has an arc, but Bluto's just Bluto. But at the same time, and also the fact that he's like, 32 when he made that movie, he's playing although he does say 7 years of college down the drain. So maybe he's older, but like, it's like, no wonder that movie made him a star. Because it's presenting everything you like about him in the most effective way possible without any of the censoring that had to go on being on television. So it's like, no wonder that movie went on to become the highest grossing comedy of all time. And it turned him into like again, they say in that one SNL book, the Backstage History of Saturday Night Live, from Belushi lowercase to Belushi uppercase.
Mm-hmm.
And it completely transformed SNL at that point because he was then the biggest star in America. And that's just an amazing thing. But then I find it really, really interesting that what does he do with all that power, right? At that point, what does he choose to do? He could have just done 5 or 6 more Animal Houses. Lord knows they would have done it, And what does he choose to do? He goes to work for Jack Nicholson in Going South, and in a small part. Now, I watched that movie not that long ago. It's not that great, despite the amazing cast. It's not as funny as I sort of want it to be for a movie with Jack Nicholson and Christopher Lloyd and Veronica Cartwright is in the movie. She's the funniest thing in that movie, actually.
And it's Mary Steenburgen's first movie.
Mary Steenburgen's first movie. But like there's Belushi plays one of the gang that's always trying to capture Nicholson's character. And it's weird because he's like, he never gets a singularly funny scene to do. And I feel like, did they cut him out of the movie or something? Like the part is so nondescript that you're like, why is even John Belushi in this movie? Now, have you guys seen that movie in a while?
I've seen it, but it's been ages since I've seen it. It has to be at least a decade or more since I've seen it last. So I really just have vague memories of Going South at this point. And I saw Going South mainly because I was like a huge Jack Nicholson fan. Right. So I wanted to see everything he did. And that's like the first of like, I think 3 movies that he's directed.
Yeah, it's a very tiny handful of movies that he's ever directed.
Yeah,
but it's a curious. But again, you look at that and you say, okay, like he's choosing to go work with Jack Nick. Like he could just do Animal House again, and he's not. He's choosing to work with Jack Nicholson. Like that's pretty amazing. And then he does this other movie, Old Boyfriends, which most people don't even know exists. This is the movie. This is the kind of movie that you look him up on IMDb and you go through his filmography and you're like, wait, what is that movie?
Yeah.
And it's for people who haven't seen it, it's a drama really with starring Talia Shire. And she goes back and it's kind of an inverse high fidelity where she goes and looks up a couple of her old boyfriends because she's going through this trauma, and I don't want to get into the whole details of it. But one of her old boyfriends is John Belushi, who is this kind of washed up kind of guy who peaked in high school kind of thing. And now you guys had not seen the movie before doing the show, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
So
I just watched it this afternoon. So.
Wow. Okay. So John, let me start with you. What did you think of Old Boyfriends?
As a movie, I wasn't too nuts about it. I didn't think it was real successful as a piece. I thought Belushi's parts were probably the most interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I found it really interesting that he plays. He's a singer in a band, and it's like the same band that he had in high school. It's sort of evolved since then, and they're like playing hotels and things like that. And he also has a side business with formal wear.
Yeah.
Because he's like, well, we play a lot of proms and stuff, so like I can cross promote the band and the formal wear. And at one point, Talia Shire, she comes to see him at a hotel or a motel he's playing at, and he's singing Jailhouse Rock.
Right? Yeah.
And this is like the year before the Blues Brothers, and I was like, that's weird that there are 2 different movies where John Belushi sings Jailhouse Rock, and I don't think I had heard of this movie before because it is probably the most obscure movie in his filmography.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it was very interesting to see him play a straight part. He's not doing a lot of mugging. He's not doing a lot of posturing. He's not even especially funny. He's just kind of playing the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to see him, and it makes you wonder what sort of career he might have had as a straight actor.
Yeah, I thought it was okay. I thought there were. I think I'm kind of in the same. I had the same thought as Trumbull did, where like I thought some parts were interesting, like when she talks to the first old boyfriend she goes to, and they have like a serious kind of heart to heart about the past and regrets, and I thought there was some interesting stuff there, but it kind of, I don't know. I feel like it kind of maybe meanders a little bit and doesn't quite get there. But overall, I thought it was an interesting film. But I did like John said, the that Belushi sings Jailhouse Rock in this movie. I made a note of that. I was like, he sings Jailhouse Rock in this too? And
Yeah.
like there were like a couple other like SNL connections that really made me chuckle at the fact that Buck Henry's in this film.
Buck Henry, right? Yep.
Yeah, and then the fact that there's a scene where Talia Shire's character is watching the Continental, the OG Continental that was the basis of that Christopher Walken sketch. I was like, oh wow, I forgot that was actually a thing. It wasn't something that SNL just made up.
Yeah, it kind of blew my mind when I first found out. Wait, that was an actual television show. And it was like shot from the camera's POV, where like you're on a date with this guy, and it's so weird.
Television was very weird back then. Yeah. I agree. It's not a good movie. It doesn't really work. The music is very bizarre. The music in the opening credits is like a thriller.
It's like a Bernard Herrmann score.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Yes. I'm like, what is this movie? But Belushi is by far the most interesting part of it because it's John Belushi playing a serious part. And there's this moment where Talia Shire takes him out in this car and she pretends that they're going to have sex. And then she basically gets his pants off, throws him out of the car, and then takes off and leaves him there with his pants down around his ankles. And there's I think it's in the book Wired, which I read many, many years ago. Not a great book, but nevertheless, I did read it. And I think they talk about there's a moment where he actually went to a screening of it, like a public screening, and watched people, and people did not like this movie because he's Bluto, and in this movie he's getting one-upped by Talia Shire, and his gonzo fans did not like that at all. And they kind of like, it was like maybe him and some other people, and they kind of walked out feeling sick, like, oh no, this movie, people are not going to like this movie. And he had to know playing that part coming off of Animal House was so not what an audience was. It reminds me a little bit of like Adam Sandler in Punch Drunk Love, just taking your audience and kind of sticking your thumb in their eye a little bit of like, I remember going to see Punch Drunk Love in the theater, and there were people who were clearly diehard Adam Sandler fans, and you could almost hear them be like, what the f- is this movie? And a couple of them got up and walked out and didn't come back. And not that Old Boyfriends is that extreme, but in terms of what he was now known for, he was Bluto and he was Jake Blues. And then to do this small little drama where he's only in about 15 minutes of it, I admire the hell out of him for doing it. I mean, it was a giant flop, but I admire him for trying. And it really says something about, I think, what he wanted to do, how he saw himself and what he was capable of doing. And apparently it's his only film directed by a woman, Joan Tewksbury. And apparently when they were done, she took him aside and said, John, you were great in this movie. I really love you, and you have a great career ahead of you. Because she knew how good he was. And it's a darn shame that he never got a chance to really do that kind of thing again. And we'll get into that a little bit more. He did, he continued trying expand what he could do a little bit, but then he goes right into 1941, which is again kind of more of the Gonzo thing. Now, let me start with you guys. Dan, let me start with you. What have you seen 1941 in a while? What do you think of it?
We actually saw it was like a year ago. We talked about it on our podcast. It was a whole episode we did on.
I think that was our July 4th show.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, like that movie, I believe my thought at the time where it was just, it's long and all over the place.
Yeah.
I believe they pack in a lot, and there's just a lot happening, and it doesn't quite come together, but it's loud and it's noisy, and there's a lot of it. That's it. I think that's pretty much my synopsis of that film.
My feelings on 1941 are basically yee. What Darren said, it's loud, it's all over the place, it's not very funny at all. I mean, it's got a lot of funny people in it, but it's just unfunny slapstick, so the film's kind of a slog. It's one of those movies that I revisit probably every 5, 6, 7 years, and I keep thinking, is it going to get better? You know what I mean? Like it's like is it going to come around and I'm going to go, oh no, it's actually
an unsung classic, and then I just watch it again and I go, oh no, it's just not funny.
Yeah.
And the decision to cast John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd in a movie and barely have them meet feels like cinematic malpractice.
Well, and Belushi's by himself for most of the movie.
Yeah.
He's got nobody to play off. He's just flying around in a plane because he's like this daredevil pilot, Wild Bill Kelso in it. And it's just, he just doesn't have much to do. He falls down a few times, and I mean, he does what he can, but it's just not an especially funny story. It's not an especially funny movie.
To sell it on Aykroyd and Belushi, and then they have I think that one brief scene together. You're just like, what? Like that's just purposefully frustrating, to have them go. It reminds me, there's a movie from the 50s called The Story of Mankind, which features the three Marx brothers in their final film, but they have no scenes together. Like what? What? Why would I want to see that? Why do I want to see Chico Marx by himself?
I am very glad that we covered 1941, though, because it gave me an excuse to reach out to Steve Bissette, who is one of the guys who drew the comic book adaptation along with Rick Veitch for Heavy Metal. And
what a strange, I mean, those guys are geniuses, but interesting choice to draw a 1941 adaptation.
Yeah, and he told us all about the insanity of producing that comic book. And Steven Spielberg literally sent a letter saying, Bissette and Veitch are ferociously talented but demented. That was after he saw the artwork that they did. And I think my favorite story of it is like they'd finally completed this huge job, and it was like I think like a 72 or 84 page comic, something like that. And after they'd finished it and they had a stack of the pages in the corner, the dog of one of them comes in from outside, and he was wet from outside, and he just like shakes off all the water and then like sits right on all the pages.
Oh my god!
So the pages had all these water damage on it, and you can see it on some of the pages in the printed book. But they realized they tried to like dry off the pages and stuff, but they realized there was so much insanity going on the pages. It really didn't matter. It was just like one more insane thing happening on the comic pages.
What would make anyone think that would work in a comic book form? That movie, trying to replicate that movie's tone in comic book form, like, you know what I mean? Like, why? I mean, I know that's what they did. They adapted all sorts of movies back then.
The post Star Wars world where that movie was such a huge phenomenon, and Marvel had a comic book adaptation of that. So I think any of those Spielberg guys did, they wanted to do a comic book adaptation. Just in case it was a similar hit. And
I've never seen the adaptation. Does it look like Belushi? Do they have like the likeness rights? Do they look like the actors?
It's a real cartoony Belushi.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting.
It's interesting to see. I can send you a link when we're
done. Yeah, I kind of want to see it now, because I mean, it's certainly the only comic book John Belushi. Well, it's not the only one. Obviously, he appeared in that Marvel team-up issue. Exactly. But I mean, it's the only film of his that was ever adapted into any sort of comic book form. That's interesting. All right, I will have to check that out. So then he does 1941, and then he does the Blues Brothers, and that's one of those movies that I think to a certain generation of people, and I think the three of us are all around there, that's just an unassailably great movie. It just is. It's a movie that to a certain subset of people, they know all the lines. It's just become part of their DNA. And for many years when I was a kid, it was my favorite movie of all time. I never got tired of it. I still don't. I could watch it every so often. Not only I think is it just a classic, Belushi is fantastic in it. He's hilarious. Again, back with John Landis. And think about the idea that you would have your star buried under sunglasses through the entire film, except for one scene. That is so not the way you were supposed to make a movie. And yet it completely works. I mean, to me, it's like, as much as I love Animal House, to me, it's like Belushi, it's the Blues Brothers. That's it, man. They crushed it. And, like, you're lucky to have one great film in your career, let alone a couple, but man, the Blues Brothers, that's just it.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's we covered that in the first year of the podcast. I remember, because what we do on the SNL Nerds, we talk about the show during the regular season, and then during the off season, like the summer hiatus where we are now, we cover movies starring SNL alumni. So the first summer we did that, we went through all the movies that had spun off of SNL sketches. So Blues Brothers was the very first movie we covered on the podcast, and yep, still works.
Yeah, no, it still holds up. I mean, there's a lot of kind of zany madcap wackiness in it, but it's in a way that sort of makes more sense. Like 1941 had a lot of over the top explosions and noise and just madness. And Blues Brothers has that too, but it also slows down a bit but knows when to pick it up and has a better pacing of the madness rather than what 1941 had. So yeah, I mean, it had amazing action in it, amazing music. I mean, good lord,
God, yeah.
I mean, Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin. I mean, James
Brown. Yeah.
I mean, holy hell! I mean, the music alone just gives it 5 stars. I mean, add that to one of Belushi's best performances and Aykroyd's best performances. The chemistry between them is just off the charts. I mean, it's still a solid movie. And Illinois Nazis, they still hate them to this day.
It's amazing how many lines still reverberate. You can still use to this day. I still see the we've got half a pack of cigarettes, a full that whole bit. I still see that in memes and stuff. It's just kind of absolutely amazing. And it was sort of funny that at the time the rest of the SNL crew was sort of like, what are they doing? Like, that was not, nobody thought that you could take a sketch on SNL and turn it into a movie. And now, of course, it's pretty standard. But back then, the rest of the group was like, what? You can't do that. That's for the show, guys. And I was like, no. This could be its own thing and have its own legend and turn into its own little center of gravity. So after Blues Brothers, he then tries to stretch again, and he does a romantic comedy, Continental Divide, with Blair Brown. Now, did you guys watch that before we recorded this?
I did not watch that one again. I have seen it I think I've seen most of it, like in bits and pieces of it at the very least. But it's been a long time since I've seen any Continental Divide. But I know I've stumbled across it on TV, and I liked what I saw.
What about you, Darren?
I have not seen it. No, but I do remember. I know it was one of his more serious roles and one of his more one of his shots at being more of a serious actor, trying to show more range and in his acting chops. And I remember seeing about a couple months, I think like a year ago, we talked about it on the podcast, but Showtime came out with the Belushi documentary.
Oh yeah,
and then there's one segment in it where Belushi is being interviewed by Gene Shalit and they promote the movie. And Gene Shalit is like, yeah, this is a different side of you. People are, I don't know if people are used to this. And then even Belushi was like, yeah, I know people want me to do Bluto for, 5 other movies. They want me to do, Bluto in space, or Bluto on the Matterhorn, or Bluto does this, or Bluto goes back in time. But no, I want to try to do something different and show more range. So you can even see back then he was thinking, yeah, I don't want to get pigeonholed into being just this big, loud frat boy guy. There's more depth to me. I want to show other things I can do. So he was even worried about it back then.
Bluto going back in time sounds kind of like a good movie, though. I have to say,
I would see and most likely enjoy all of those movies. I mean, Bluto in space. Yeah, sign me up for that right now.
Yeah, those are go pictures, I would say. But okay, all right. So yeah, he tried Continental Divide. I watched it again for this. It's not a great movie, but it's so nice a movie that you have a hard time, at least I do, really disliking it. It's not particularly funny, and you don't buy Blair Brown and John Belushi as a romantic couple at all. So, right there, you're like, well, wait a minute. If there's no romance, there's no comedy. How does romantic comedy work? And it really kind of doesn't, but it's just such a good-hearted attempt that that sounds so condescending.
This is a great recommendation.
I don't mean it to be. It's Michael Apted directed it. I mean, we've all seen movies that are not good and you walk away kind of angry. You're like, oh God, there are other movies that aren't good and you just kind of shrug and go, yeah, that wasn't very good, but you just don't have like a grudge against it. That's that movie. I'm like, all right, they're trying something different. Blair Brown is fun. and the whole angle of him being like a Chicago reporter, like that's kind of cool, but it just doesn't really hang together. And there is, you could tell that like there's moments where like they're trying to insert like some Bluto-ish humor, which feels very discordant. So it just doesn't really work. But again, you're like, good for him for trying. Good for him for trying something different, as you just talked about, Darren. Like he could have just done Bluto in space. Bluto goes back in time, and they would have funded that immediately. And in fact, we'll talk about one of the things that the studios were trying to get him to do when he passed away was a Bluto-esque comedy, which if you read it on paper sounds like it's absolute garbage. But again, we'll talk about that in a minute. So then he decides to reteam with his pal Dan for Neighbors. And my first instinct about Neighbors is to repeat the thing I read about in the Belushi biography by his widow, Judy Jacqueline Belushi.
Yeah, I've got that book.
Yeah, it's a great book, which is, some movie shoots go well, some go just okay, some go badly. And then there were some where the stars seriously considered taking out a hit on the director. That's what happened on Neighbors. That's a bad shoot. That's a bad shoot.
And what I love about that story is Belushi is like, I can't believe how cheap it is. $5,000. You could get a used car for that.
I think that's the part that upset him. Yeah. Not that the basic morality of we're going to put out a hit on director John G. Avildsen.
People were like, but John, you shouldn't put a hit out on the director because that is wrong. And he's like, yeah, but I can't believe how cheap it is.
Think of the savings.
It's just like, so, okay, for those of you listening who have not seen this movie, like I said, it was released in 1981. It is based on a novel by Thomas Berger, which was a best-selling novel. To be honest, having seen the movie, I can't for the life of me imagine this as a book. Like, how did this work as a book? But okay.
I know the book has a different ending. I did read that.
Okay. All right. I just can't. And the plot of it is such, again, let me get a very brief plot synopsis of this movie. The low-key suburban life of Earl Keese and his bored wife Enid is thrown into chaos when a new set of neighbors move into their other house at the end of their cul-de-sac, Vic and Ramona Zeck. Ramona wastes no time coming on to Earl, even with Enid in the next room, then pulling the rug out from under him, only to start the process all over again. Even worse for Earl is Vic, a loud, boorish guy who invites himself over to dinner, demands Earl pay for the meal, then borrows Earl's car to get the food, only to pocket the cash and cook the meal for himself next door. Enid is no help, seemingly more disposed towards the new neighbors than her own husband. Tensions rise to the point that violence breaks out, pathetic, cartoony violence, made even worse for Earl when their college daughter comes home unannounced and, like her mother, seems to take more to Vic and Ramona than Earl. Come sunrise, the Zecks plan to leave the neighborhood. Earl has a change of heart, realizing that the Zecks have injected more excitement into his life than he's had in years. He sets fire to his house and joins Vic and Ramona in their car, heading out for parts unknown. Earl Keese is played by John Belushi. Vic, of course, played by Dan Aykroyd. Ramona Zeck is played by Kathy Moriarty. Enid Keese is played by Catherine Walker. Elaine Keese, Lauren Marie Taylor, and the two supporting characters, Pa Greavy and Perry Greavy. These mechanics are played by the SNL vet Tim Kazurinsky and Tino Insana. It was directed by John G. Avildsen, who passed away in 2017. He directed movies like, of course, Rocky, Joe, Save the Tiger, and The Karate Kid. Screenplays by Larry Gelbart, who, of course, was the major creative force behind a show I'm familiar with, MASH. He also wrote Oh God, Tootsie, Barbarians at the Gate, had one of the great screenplay and writing careers in Hollywood. Now, the original conception of this movie was that Aykroyd was going to play Earl, the button-down suburbanite, and Belushi, of course, was going to play the wild man. And legend has it is, right before shooting, they decided, we're going to switch parts. We want to do something different. Belushi's going to play the put-upon suburban henpecked guy, and Aykroyd's going to play the wild man. Now, that story's been repeated so much, I assume it's true at this point. Yeah. But it makes no sense to me because Earl is clearly the leading character in this movie, right? I mean, it's clearly his movie. Yeah. So it's like, would Belushi and Aykroyd would have made a movie where Aykroyd was the star? That seems unlikely, doesn't it?
I hadn't thought about it in that regard, that the part of Earl is a bigger part than the part of Vic. But I mean, them switching parts is just so wrong-handed. I can't. I mean, I've seen the movie and I still can't quite understand it.
It reminds me of a story I heard about when Neil Simon was putting The Odd Couple on Broadway.
Yes. Oh,
and and it was Art Carney and Walter Matthau were going to do it. And Matthau at the last, because of course he had played Oscar Madison and so successfully, he owned that part. And at the last second, he's like, I want to play the other part. I want to play Felix. I want to stretch. I want to, I'm an actor. I want to do something. It's my Walter Matthau impression.
Very nice.
And thank you. And Neil Simon's response was, Walter, go act in somebody else's play Oscar Madison for me. I was like, look, let's not fuck around here. Let's just play the part that you're born to play. And I could see that Belushi wants to do something different. Casting him as Earl Keese is gutsy, but at the same time you say, but there's a reason why most people don't think it's going to work, because it doesn't work. No. That's why.
Like at all.
No. So, okay. Now you guys both watched this movie pretty recently. I mean, we can get into the details of it, but I mean, overall, like, what was your impression of Neighbors? Darren, let me start with you.
Yeah, it was, it was, it was interesting. I'll say that. It wasn't, I don't want to say it was bad or terrible. It was interesting.
I can take care of that. I'll say it's bad and terrible.
Okay. Wow. Okay. There you go. I mean, I kind of see what they were trying to do. Like, they were trying to make, it seems like they're trying to make, I mean, basically the movie is about a man who's going through a midlife crisis and, living in suburbia and the mundane life of it and how that gets to you and wears you down. It just, I think the main problem with this film is the tone. Like, I don't think they got a good grasp of what the tone of the film should be, because at sometimes it's kind of slapsticky, other times it's kind of very surreal, other times it's like a dark comedy, and like the music. Also, that's another thing I didn't like. The music in the background was it didn't suit the tone of.
Oh boy, the music in this movie.
The music is all over the place, and I think that the guy that did the music is
Bill Conti.
Bill Conti from Rocky, yeah.
So yeah, and like he knows how to do this. So I don't understand why, like, sometimes during some scenes there's like almost like cartoony music playing in the background.
Wow, 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 wow.
According to the IMDb trivia, they did have a different type of score at first. It was like a more dramatic score, but it wasn't working with that.
By Tom Scott, one of the Blues Brothers.
Yeah, he had, and so Elvison had Bill Conti rescore the movie to emphasize the comedic elements. And
oh boy, does it!
Well,
it tries to.
It just doesn't work for a different reason now.
But I think that's the main thing, because like you said, like Dan and John really had problems with the director, because the director was trying to make this film more slapsticky, wacky, but he's not really a comedy director, so it's like his version of slapsticky, wacky. But then Dan and John really wanted to make this more of a darker comedy. And then they would really feel like the director was ruining the film. I believe at one point, John even calls like John Landis to see if he could come direct this film while the film is being made. And Landis was like, I'm doing American Werewolf in London. I can't. Don't you already have a director? Why are you calling me? It was like, like that.
What a question to ask. Don't you already have a director?
Yeah. He also called up Harold Ramis and he's like, hey, I'd like to talk to you about directing this film I'm in. And Ramis was like, okay, yeah, cool. Send the script over. I'll take a look at it. And he was like, well, let's start shooting next week. and Ramis was like, wait, are you talking about Neighbors?
Yeah. Like, so I think that's the main thing I had the problem with it. The tone is all over the place. It's like people sort of act the way not people aren't normally supposed to act. And a lot of these things, a lot of times I'm thinking, all right, is this happening in his head? Is he, because like you said, like, Belushi's character is like the main character. Like the whole film is told through his eyes. So like at the beginning, I was thinking, oh, is this told through like an unreliable narrator type of film? Because in the beginning, when he meets his neighbors, like the first one, Carrie Moriarty, like immediately lets herself in, immediately hits on him. and like takes a bath in in their home, but the wife never sees her, and then Vic comes in and immediately sits down and takes his money in his car, but the wife never sees her too. So like part of me is thinking, all right, well, is this actually happening, or is this happening in his head? This is like sort of the rebellious like thing he's created up in his mind to sort of shake up his mundane suburban lifestyle. Or maybe I'm giving this movie too much credit, but yeah, I think overall the tone really messed up the movie overall.
Agreed. Yeah, it did occur to me when I was watching the movie. Yeah, is this all a dream? Is this all in his head? Because I was surprised that, because I knew the basic premise of the movie is like, the henpecked suburban guy is driven nuts by his wacky neighbors. But I was expecting it to be over an extended period of time. But no, this movie takes place over the course of like 24 hours.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's weird.
Yeah.
But none of it is funny, like at all. I didn't laugh or crack a smile once. It's just like stuff that happens. And so the movie's only about an hour and a half, but it feels like about 6.
Yeah, it sure does.
It is a slog, man. It is. Yeah, it's just not good.
Yeah, it's I'm glad you mentioned the music, Darren, because that one of I generally don't notice film music. I don't listen to soundtracks independently of the films that they're in. That's just not something that I really bother with.
Not even John Williams' Superman soundtrack?
No, I really I love it. I love it within the context of the movie, but listening to it separately just doesn't do anything for me. So for a film score to be bad, I would have to really notice it. But holy crap. And Bill Conti, obviously talented composer, no doubt, Oscar-winning composer. But man, the music in this movie is god awful. And there's one scene where after Earl gets kind of flummoxed once again, and you literally hear like that sad trombone music where it's like, wah, 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 wah. And you're just like, what is this movie? Like, what were they thinking? And knowing that one of John's friends, Tom Scott from the Blues Brothers, could have done it. You're like, well, that would have been a guy in simpatico with John's sort of tone and aesthetic. And I think the other problem I have with it is comedy out of frustration is really hard to pull off because you have to release that pressure valve. And if you never do, you're just mad the whole time. And through this entire movie's running time, it's just Vic and or Ramona getting the drop on Earl and making him look like an idiot. And then his wife treating him horribly. At no point does he really get a moment of victory. And so you're just like watching John Belushi just being treated like garbage for 90 minutes. And you like John Belushi. You inherently like him, whether you know him from Animal House or SNL or the Blues Brothers, or you're just watching this film. This is the only film you've ever seen. I think you like him as a
God help you if this is the only
God
film.
help you if this is the only John Belushi film. Yeah. But I mean, it's like he's naturally charismatic and sympathetic, even when, he was playing crazy characters, and watching him just get treated like shit is just not funny and frustrating as all get out. And it's just like, you got to wonder, like, at what point did anybody, it seems like Belushi and Aykroyd knew it wasn't working. They knew. Avildsen, I don't know if he really knew, or he was just like, well, we just got to finish this. But the fact that, as you were talking about, they tried to get a director in the middle of the film to replace them is unreal. And it's sort of funny. You mentioned that, Landis was working on American Werewolf in London. I know at some point that the studio tried to pitch Aykroyd and Belushi to star in that movie. And that's a wonderfully parallel universe that I would love to see. I love American Werewolf in London. It's one of my favorite horror movies of all time, but I would love to live in the alternate world where Belushi and Aykroyd play those two roles. That would have been an insane movie to see those two in it.
Wow, I didn't even heard of that. That's
Yeah.
Belushi and Aykroyd in a horror movie.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
Can you imagine Aykroyd with all that viscera hanging off of him, yelling at? I mean, that would have been something. So it's like, yeah. And then some parallel world, they started that and Neighbors never got made, and we're probably a little better off.
I actually have a book by Larry Gelbart, Laughing Matters. Rob, do you have this?
No, I've never read it. I can't believe I haven't, considering how much I love Larry Gelbart, but I've never read it.
Well, he talks a little about the experience, or his experience with Neighbors. He wasn't really around for the making of it, but he talks about how he was a fan of the novel, and I think he was even reading the novel when Swifty Lazar called him up and was like, "Hey, how would you like to write the movie?" And he was a fan of the novel, so he signed on. And then, he talked about how then it was John Avildsen became the director, and he was like, I don't know if he's a good choice, but he was the hot person at the time because he was coming off of Rocky. And then it was Belushi and Aykroyd, and he talks a little about that. He says, our two stars couldn't decide who would play which character in the film, who would play the straight role and who would play the fiend. To everyone else, the logical choice was as clear as the nose on Belushi's face. That feature often obscured, however, by the little spoon that constantly protruded from it.
Oh.
And then he says in parentheses, if I appear to speak disrespectfully of the dead, is only because I am trying to write this in the context of the time. Mm-hmm. In the end, Belushi played the straight role and Aykroyd played the fiend. It was a kind of inside joke, the kind that keeps audiences from going inside a theater.
That's good. That's
and then he talks about when they were getting together for the initial read through for the whole cast to read through the script for the first time. And he said, Belushi, an extremely popular and sought after performer at the time, was also, on the day we read, extremely loaded. Constantly stopping the reading for trips to the men's room made him even more so. What he was ingesting, I have no idea. I'm a writer, not a chemist. But whatever it was making him highly creative. Every time he returned from the men's room, he had a few more thoughts for improving the screenplay. I was beginning to think that instead of a dealer in the toilet, he had a writer in there. He couldn't stop spouting his ideas. It's a pity he wasn't there to hear them. He was as generous with the substance he was abusing as he was with his ideas, and he was childish in refusing to read with even a tentative sense of what I'd spent months writing, good or bad. Aykroyd, too, had a lot of ideas he wanted incorporated into the script. My gratitude not only knew no bounds, it was positively stillborn. Having John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd help with a script was like throwing a party and having the Borgias as your bartenders.
Oh, boy.
Wow.
Okay, along with Avildsen later, I asked him how in the world he was going to be able to handle Belushi. What's the problem with Belushi, he said. Belushi had spent the afternoon higher than the ceiling fan and the director hadn't noticed? Yeah.
Yeah, see, I thought, when I first saw this movie, part of me was thinking, all right, maybe it's a thing where, because I didn't read the book, maybe it's one of those things where it's a really good book, but sometimes really good books don't translate to film very well.
Yeah.
So maybe that was it. Maybe the book just didn't, it just couldn't translate to film. But it sounds more and more like the issue was, too many cooks in the kitchen type of thing, where everybody wanted to could have had different ideas of what the film should be. Yeah. And then, they all just kind of clashed together, and they didn't really come together with one cohesive idea as to the tone of the movie and what this movie should be. And it shows. It just because this movie, the tone is just all over the place.
Well, I mean, Belushi and Aykroyd and Larry Gelbart, they're just two very, very different styles of comedy.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
Larry Gelbart's comedy is very precise. He's a big fan of wordplay.
Yep.
And, it's just it's very constructed comedy. It's like a Swiss watch. And Belushi and Aykroyd are, much more loosey-goosey and improv and, hey, let's see what happens. Let's try some stuff and that sort of thing. So it's not too surprising that they were incompatible. But
yeah, I'm glad you said that, John, because I love John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, and I love Larry Gelbart, but I also know those three should not be collaborating. That is not a good mix.
No, it's like fudge and pickles or something. It's just two good tastes that they don't taste good together unless you're having pregnancy cravings or something.
It reminds me a little bit of those movies you hear about that get made every so often that feature nothing but the top talent, and you're on paper, how can that lose? And then it just sort of does. Yeah. You're oh, we've got this person and this director and this writer, there's no way, and I don't want to, I have some movies in mind when I'm saying that, but I don't want to slam these other movies. But there's,
go ahead. Slam the movies.
They're Hook. Yeah. Like they're just movies that, like, again, on paper, you just say, how can that go wrong?
Yeah.
When you've got that level of talent, and then it just somehow doesn't congeal. And that's what this is. Because I'm glad you said that, but Larry Gelbart's comedy is so specific, and it's also gentle. It's a gentle. There's a warmness to it, even when he's writing MASH episodes where he's killing off a main character. Mm-hmm. There's a gentility and a warmth to his comedy that, as much as I love Aykroyd and Belushi, they kind of don't have that. I mean, they do have some warmth. There's some warmth to the Blues Brothers, and that I think gets kind of overlooked. But when they're in their most gonzo-ish, that it's slash and burn, and that is not Larry Gelbart. So it's like, those two things just absolutely do not work. And it's got to be brutal going through the process of making a film, spending months making a movie, knowing it's not working. It's got to be so demoralizing, because you're like, there's no way to fix this. Like there's no way to salvage this. And I mean, performance wise, another thing, like, I love Dan Aykroyd. That said, I think we all know from seeing his movies over the years, Dan Aykroyd needs somebody to run, kind of like rein him in.
Yeah.
Because if he doesn't get reined in, he goes way out there and leaves a lot of people in the dust.
And that's true of him as a writer too.
Yes. The Ghostbusters, like the Ghostbusters script was 300 pages and they like busted ghosts on Saturn, and like Harold Ramis was like, this is unshootable, Dan. Let's put him in New York. Oh, okay. That's a lot. Like he's an idea guy and he's a concept guy, but he needs somebody to say, whoa. And I feel like if they're making this movie and they hate Avildsen to the point that they want to put out a hit on him, then there's nobody telling Dan Aykroyd, wait a minute, this Vic guy is so obnoxious.
Yeah.
That, like, it's not funny anymore. Like, he's not charmingly obnoxious. He's just a dick. He's just a giant dick. And it's not funny that he is being cruel to John Belushi.
Yeah, when you let Aykroyd go and do whatever he wants, that's how you get movies like Nothing But Trouble.
Oh, yeah. Woof. I saw that in the theater as well. Yeah. Oh boy. So yeah, it's a damn shame that this is his final film, because, I mean, his career was abbreviated. I mean, you just mentioned Larry Gelbart making references to Belushi's drug habit. And obviously, the point of the show is to celebrate people's careers. It is not, I'm not interested in dragging anybody, no matter what choices they make in their career, because everyone's always trying to do good work. I think most people are trying to do good work, but it is tragic that there were moments in Belushi's life where he could get clean and, like there's that whole part about where he had that bodyguard with him. What was the guy's name, John?
Smokey.
Do you remember? Smokey, yeah.
Yeah.
And
he was clean all the way through Continental Divide,
yes,
just before this. But apparently he fell off the wagon during this movie, because since the movie takes place in a 24-hour period, they did a lot of night shoots.
Yep.
And Aykroyd says in the Belushi book that, early 80s, everybody's doing cocaine just to stay up through the night. Oh. And so Belushi fell off the wagon. And he also didn't have Smokey. He didn't have the same support system or watchdog in place. Yeah, not a good combo. Not a good combo.
And you can imagine if you're someone of John Belushi's insecurities, and he's working on a movie that he knows is not going to work, and he's coming off of a couple of films that are flops. The Blues Brothers was a moderate success. I think its fame and its legend has grown over time, but it wasn't like it was an Animal House level hit. But he's coming off a couple of films that are not well received, and then he's working on this movie that is not working. They know it in the middle of it that it's not working. Then his demons reared their ugly heads, and he went back to doing drugs, and that's, of course, what ended up killing him. I'm old enough to remember that news. I remember that happening and just being so completely shocked at that and just feeling how tragic it was. This guy was only 33 years old and he succumbs to this. And, they mentioned this in the Belushi book, and I know they mentioned it in Wired, but like, when he was in his last couple of months, he was working on two different scripts that the studios were trying to get him to do. One was a kind of like romantic comedy adventure movie called Noble Rot, which was set in wine country, and that was running into some problems. And then there was this other piece of junk called The Joy of Sex, which apparently was kind of what you were mentioning earlier, Darren, like, you know, their version of Bluto in fill in the blank. And they talk about, apparently in that script, there's even a scene where like Belushi's character would have worn like a diaper is like in like a baby bonnet. And they just said, people that read it said it was depressing. It was depressing thinking that this is what they thought Belushi should do, that this is what he was reduced to, that he was going to humiliate him. And they were just like, no, just do this, do Bluto again. And that sent him down this dark path. And unfortunately, like I said, in March of 1982, he passed away, and that leaves Neighbors to be his final film. And this film was, they released this as a Christmas movie, which, man, can you imagine?
Yeah, that's the other thing. I was like, this does not belong in Christmas time. There's nothing about this movie that says Christmas.
No,
it doesn't belong in any season. Let's be real.
No, it's not, and it's not the kind of thing like an Animal House where you're going to go and see it 4 or 5 times. You know, like you're like, oh, it's like a party. You know, it's just not that kind of movie. And, you know, again, I rewatched it again for this, and I wanted to like it more than I did, and I just didn't. And it just makes me sad to see Belushi kind of waste his time in this. And there's a part near the end where after like the 17th scene of Ramona telling him that she wants to bang him and then pulling the rug out from under him, she offers it to him one more time. And then there's this extended sequence where he goes into the bathroom to get ready for his finally he's going to sleep with her. And it's set to Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. And it's not funny. And it goes on for what approximately feels like about 25 minutes, this sequence. And you're just like, what? Why did anybody think this was funny? He's brushing his teeth. He's trimming his like nose hair. He's flossing, and it goes on forever. And you're just like, it just broke my heart to see the legendary John Belushi just wasting his time in this.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the person filming it was like, well, maybe the audiences might not like this movie, but maybe they'll want to hear Staying Alive in its entirety.
Maybe so. Oh my God. It just, yeah. And then the ending kind of comes out of nowhere where all of a sudden it's the next morning. Enid has left him. By the way, I don't mean to be, again, I try and keep positive on the show. Catherine Walker is Enid Keese. Her character is awful. It's just an awful character. And Catherine Walker does not bring very much to it. She was famously the wife, or at least the partner of Doug Kenny, who played Stork in Animal House and was one of the National Lampoon, one of the great architects of 70s comedy. But she is not funny in this movie. She's cruel to Earl. And then you get this ending where she decides to take off, and she's going to go and kind of like take this class and sort of leaving him behind. And Earl just decides, oh, you know what? I'm going to go run away with Vic and Ramona. And no, it just doesn't work. And kind of what you were saying, Darren, about, you know, maybe I'm reading too much into this. I feel like the minute he gets in the car with these two, they're going to drive about 2 miles out of town, and they're going to push him out the door and drive away. Like, I feel like the joke's going to be on him yet again.
Maybe, yeah. Like, I don't know. Again, this film is just, I don't know, it's just so confounding. Like, you think like, oh, maybe it's a thing where it's like celebrating, you know, counterculture, you know, like Easy Rider or Five Easy Pieces, where it's like, yeah, just, you know, living in a suburb, that ain't where it's at, man. You got to go out on the road and get the shackles off of your suburban life. You think that's what they're celebrating? I think that's the message you're trying to say here. Like, if you're somebody who's in a midlife crisis and bored with your family, just like abandon your home and burn it all down and just go out on the road. I guess that's the message here, but it's just, it just doesn't come through very clearly in this film.
I don't know if there was enough thought put into this movie for it to have a message. I mean, it having a message kind of implies that they knew what they were doing. And I don't feel like anybody involved in this movie really knew what they were doing.
Yeah, it is such a shame to.
It's just a mess.
Yeah,
you know?
I remembered I owned this movie on VHS back in the day. Yeah, because and I'll tell you, my devotion to SNL, the original SNL, which I watched the original SNL. My parents let me stay up to watch it, even though I was much too young to really see a lot of the humor, even understand it. My devotion to SNL and specifically to Aykroyd and Belushi and Bill Murray was so total. It defined everything that I thought was funny. That I was like, okay, if I'm not laughing at Neighbors, it's because there's something wrong with me. I'm just not getting it. Right. And you know what I mean? And so I had the Blues Brothers on VHS and I had Animal House on VHS. I even had Dr. Detroit on VHS. I mean, come on. Yeah. And I bought Neighbors and I watched it and I'm like, I'm not really laughing. And then I would watch it maybe once again, again, like another year or whatever. And I'm like, no, this is, and then eventually I just got rid of it because I'm like, okay, I grew up enough to say, you know what? No, this one doesn't work. I'll just watch the Blues Brothers again because this one just not working.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I noticed that, like, I'm sure, like, it frustrated a lot of people at the time when the movie came out too. Like, look at the movie poster for this film; it does not prepare you for what the actual movie is going to be like. Because you look at the movie poster; it's very brightly lit. It looks like it's going to be, some zany screwball madcap comedy. You see the neighbors peeking in the window. Belushi's back to the door like, can't let them in. Like, you think you're going to get something wacky, and there is wackiness in this film, but it's not that. So, like, I feel like, because, like, I know the film wasn't super well reviewed, and a lot of people, like, really hated it, and, like, I can sort of understand that too, because, like, that movie poster kind of leads you to think it's going to be one thing, but it's totally you get a whole nother thing.
Yeah, they probably knew, like, we got to market this somehow. So, okay, how about a little Animal House-ish? How's that? See if that'll work. And you're like, no, it just doesn't. Yeah, like I said, I give it a chance, and then I just watch it. It's like 1941. I rewatch it, and I go, no, it's still just not working for me. So, okay, it's an unfortunate end to his film career. And, we'll never know, obviously, what he could have done. Obviously, anybody that goes from Animal House to Old Boyfriends. Again, I don't want to oversell Old Boyfriends like it's some hidden masterpiece. It's not, but it's so.
It is not.
No, it is not. It is straight up not. But it is so clear that for a guy who was legendary for his out of control appetites, that he had enough sensitivity as a performer to kind of say, I know I can do other things, and I'm willing to maybe give the audience something that it doesn't want to stretch what I think I can do. And when you see nowadays how directors can take an actor that's been out of the limelight for a while and give them a new, whether it's like a John Travolta and Pulp Fiction kind of thing, where they can take somebody and say, present them in a new way. Tragic to think of what John Belushi could have done if he had managed to get a little older and maybe, like what Bill Murray did. Bill Murray managed to do. Bill Murray had his own flop in drama in The Razor's Edge, but yet, and I have my own thoughts about that movie. It's my favorite book of all time. But I mean, he obviously lived long enough to be able to go do different things, and now he can do anything he wants because the audience will accept him. He can do silly comedy, or he can do something incredibly dramatic, and I think Belushi had that ability. It's unfortunate that circumstances is he never got the chance to do it. And it's quite a tragic end. Now, I try and end these shows when we're talking about a movie that isn't very good. I try and end the show on somewhat of an up note. And so there is one other thing I want to mention is that, yes, this is his last film, but one thing that I love and I find is kind of charming in its own way. Now, you guys talk about on your show, you review the episodes as they come out with each new season. For people who haven't heard the show, do you ever go back and review older episodes that have aired long before you guys started the show?
We've done that a few times. When Chaz Boseman passed away, we went back and we watched the episode he hosted because we hadn't covered that one before. It happened just a year or two before we started the podcast. And let's see, on our 100th episode, we went back and we watched the first episode of SNL. And
I think didn't we do when Betty White passed away? We did her episode.
yeah, we did, and we also did like I think the Thanksgiving or the Christmas shows where it was like the compilations. And yeah, we enjoy going back and revisiting those. Those are interesting.
Because I bring that up because in season 6, and this is connected to kind of Neighbors, was that Belushi at this time, he was kind of getting out of the blues a little, and he was very much becoming a fan of punk music. Yeah. And he had fallen in love with a band called Fear, punk band. And they actually were booked on the soundtrack to Neighbors. And they apparently did a song for it, and the studio took one listen and said, forget it. No way are they going to be on the soundtrack. And they got kicked off. And Belushi felt so bad that he had kind of gotten these guys into the soundtrack and then they get kicked off, that he used his influence with then SNL producer Dick Ebersol to get Fear booked on Saturday Night Live, because this was during season 6 when Ebersol, or season 7, the beginning of season 7, where Ebersol was running the show during the 5-year interval where Lorne Michaels was not. It's the Halloween show hosted by Donald Pleasance, and Fear is the musical guest.
Yeah.
But
it went completely smoothly.
Yeah, yes, and it all went totally fine. But what I love about that episode is it opens in the cold open has Donald Pleasance, and it's a backstage slice of life thing where he's getting ready for the show and different cast members are coming in. Hi, Donald, you're going to be great. Eddie Murphy comes out, which again, it's just funny to see Eddie Murphy and Donald Pleasance in the same picture.
Yeah.
But, they're all there, and then Donald Pleasance walks off, and this figure comes out of one of the men's room stalls, and who is it? It's John Belushi, making his final appearance on Saturday Night Live, and the audience goes apeshit. I mean, just goes nuts, because he had famously left the show after the 4th season, and in kind of not on the best terms with Lorne Michaels. And here he is back, and he doesn't say anything. He doesn't even get to say live from New York, which was a curious choice. I don't know why they got rid of that for a couple of episodes during those seasons. I don't understand what Dick Ebersol was doing.
I don't think I realized they did that.
They did for a little while. They just started the music. They don't do live from New York. Why you would get rid of that tagline. I don't know. But nevertheless, Belushi comes out, and this would have been October of 1981. Neighbors would have been finished shooting by then, because the film came out in December. So, this was in some ways like his last appearance he got to make. And I have to think it must have warmed his heart a little to go be back on his old stomping grounds and to get the reception that he got, because people just go insane, because the show had a rough 6th season, and it was trying to find its way in the 7th season. And here is, kind of the returning king, John Belushi, just making this cameo. And not to overstate it, but I find it touching in its own way to see him one last time getting the glory that he sort of deserved, because he was so great on that show. So in some ways, that's sort of his final appearance, really. And that's the way I like to think of him, is going out is getting that round of applause, because he had a lot of problems, and unfortunately he succumbed to them. But man, when he was great, he was like the best ever, because he's John Belushi.
No, well said.
Yeah. It's kind of funny you brought up the Fear thing. We actually just talked about that on the podcast recently, because we just covered the movie Clue, which of course Mr. Body is played by Lee Ving, who was the lead singer of Fear. So we actually talked about that a little bit. Yeah. Fear. They did some stage diving. They wrecked a lot of stuff. It didn't go smoothly, guys.
No. It's apparently it's not in you can't see it in the rerun, but apparently it happened live. Is that Fear apparently grew so out of control, at least by Dick Ebersol standards, that he cut the number and they went to a filmed bit, and that was it. That's what you saw on the live show, was the musical number just stop in the middle. and they go to like some pre-taped bit. So it's like, yeah, didn't go super well. Fear, not invited back on SNL. So, so yeah, everybody. I mean, that is the checkered film career of John Belushi. There's some great movies there. Of course, there's Animal House and the Blues Brothers. You can actually watch some of Belushi's scenes from Old Boyfriends on YouTube. Some people have taken those scenes, and I would recommend it if you're a fan of John Belushi and you want to see him doing something very different.
Yeah,
you could check that out on YouTube. I would not recommend renting the movie. I don't think it's worth. Well, you know what? On Amazon Prime, it's like $2. So maybe
it's not worth it.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
I by the end of the movie, I was just like, I do not like this movie.
Yeah,
Elliot Shire's character is just kind of an asshole.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. But like I said, it's I still go back to the best films of his, again, the Blues Brothers and Animal House. And so, this was something I always wanted to do. So guys, thank you for coming. Again, I'm sorry that I subjected you to neighbors one last time, but I appreciate you doing the show.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us. It was an experience. We'll just leave it at that.
I enjoyed this part of it.
There we go. Okay, fair enough.
I did not enjoy watching the movies I had to watch for this, but I enjoyed discussing it with you guys.
Fair enough. That's all I can ask. So, well, why don't you tell people where they can find SNL Nerds?
We're on the Non-Productive podcast network, but if you just do a search on any of your podcast carriers for SNL Nerds, you should see us pop up. We've been doing the show for nearly 4 years now. We're just coming up on episode 200.
Nice.
So we're very proud of that. And like I said earlier, we cover Saturday Night Live, the new episodes of Saturday Night Live when they have a season going. And then on the off weeks and during the summer hiatus, we cover movies and occasionally TV shows starring SNL alums. We've done Clue. We've done This is Spinal Tap. We did the Ghostbusters remake. Darren, what am I missing here?
I'm looking.
And you've had some actual SNL veterans on the show.
We've had a few. Yeah, we talked to Siobhan Fallon for our 150th episode. Had a great interview with her for our 200th episode, which should be out by the time this podcast goes up. We talked to
Gary Kroger.
Gary Kroger. Yeah,
that's so cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, and he's a great interview. He had a lot of great stories to tell from his time at SNL, which was also during the Dick Ebersol years. So that was a lot of fun. We talked to a few writers from the show as well.
We talked to Hugh Fink, who's a writer on SNL. We talked to Dave Cyrus, who wrote on SNL, and who also went on to write the Pete Davidson film King of Staten Island.
Yeah. Wow. We talked to Wally Fairstein, who is the cue card guy on SNL and has been for years. And you see him pop up periodically on Late Night with Seth Meyers. He's sort of a recurring character on there. So, and yeah, he was great to talk to.
That's really cool. That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, I said I've been watching SNL since I was a kid. And even when I think about I think it was John Lovitz who said in an interview once that SNL has gone beyond good or bad. It's a restaurant and a good location.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's about right. And even when SNL was bad, I still watch it because it's still SNL. It just still, it's got something that the shows that have followed kind of just don't have. They all have their own pluses and minuses, but SNL is still SNL. And even when it's terrible, you're like, well, I'll come back next week though, because it might be better next week.
Yeah, I mean, the analogy that I use is, neither Darren nor I are sports fans, but we look at it, it's like, it's rooting for your favorite sports team. You don't stop watching them just because they're losing.
Yeah.
You're still rooting for your team.
Yeah.
You want them to have a great show. And they don't always, and I don't think it's a realistic expectation to expect every sketch to be great. Because that just so rarely happens. If they do like 2 or 3 good sketches in a show, then that was a good episode of SNL as far as I'm concerned.
Before we sign off here, I just want to ask you guys, not that you're experts in that you have any behind the scenes information, but nevertheless, you've done 200 episodes on the show and you've been examining it kind of like under the jeweler's loop kind of thing. And you've talked to writers and you've talked to cast members. I just want your quick hunches for the new season, right? We know that a bunch of people have left, but the cast already had like 25 people in it. So in your mind, do you think when they come back, are they bringing in some more new people and keeping the cast at that gargantuan size? Or do you think they'll just trim it back so the cast is a more manageable number and the people that have remained actually get some stuff to do? Because there were some cast members who just are not on the show for like 3-4 weeks at a time. So what's your hunch, Darren or John? What do you think? What do you think Lauren's going to do?
I would like it. I would love it if they, like, now that Kate and Nady and Kyle and Pete have left, I would love it if they just concentrated on the cast that they have now, because they already have so many people. They have more than enough people just to let, like you said, let them do their thing, let each person get their own thing on, and just really kind of, let them explore the stage and let everybody get a moment to shine. That being said, I still feel like they're probably going to hire maybe 1 or 2 new people, and I kind of wish they wouldn't. I'm one of those people who thinks the cast is too huge as is, and I just like a more compact, tighter cast.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say I think Lauren's probably going to hire 3 new people. Lauren seems to like having a packed cast, and I get where he's coming from. I think Lauren, at his age, I think he's like around 80 now. Yeah, he's got to be around 80 because the show's been going for nearly 50 seasons. I think he doesn't want to have to remake the show from scratch again, especially when he's probably going to wrap it up in a couple of years. He's made noises about possibly retiring after the 50th season, which is a good time for him to bow out, probably, if he chooses
seasons. To. Imagine that.
If he chooses to stick around, hey, do it until you don't want to do it anymore, Lauren, whatever you want to do. But yeah, he seems to like having a real deep bench of people, because that allows him, if like he's losing a few people because they're off doing their outside projects, so Cecily Strong's doing another season of Schmigadoon or something, he can still like put on a show. He's not really handicapped by that. So that seems to be how he likes to do the show. And he hasn't really remade the show from scratch since like the mid-90s, I would say. It's always been a steady evolution ever since then.
Right.
Where he just brings in a few people each season. Some of those people stick around, some of them don't. So yeah, I'd love to see more of the current cast get more of a showcase. It'll be interesting to see if like some more people choose to leave, or if Lauren lets a few people go. I would not be surprised if Cecily Strong chose to leave. I would not be surprised if like a couple of the newer cast members get let go. I don't want to say names because I don't want to jinx it, but if you watch the show, you can probably figure out who's likely.
Yeah, the ones who don't appear for like a month straight. You're like,
yeah, the ones we're ready to put on milk cartons.
Give Melissa Villasenor more to do, for the love of God.
yeah.
She's funny. Why is she so in the light of the show? So, well, I mean, God, we're almost at the season. The show comes back like late September, early October, so we're almost there.
We are.
So we will find out. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I like the SNL Nerd Show a lot, and I admire again, any show that gets to 200 episodes. That is an amazing achievement. I know that is hard to do. So again, thank you both for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
thanks a lot, Rob. We had a fun time.
Yeah, this is a blast, Rob. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. So, all right, everybody. Now, normally this is where I would wrap up the show, but this time I'm going to take a little break. We're going to run some podcast promos. And when I come back, I'm going to do some listener feedback.